Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're taking a look at another Japanese modeling book here. This one is the Frame Arms Girl Painting Manual, and it is very, very in-depth. There's a ton of information here, and so for that reason, normally when I do these videos, I usually go like pretty in-depth through them, showing you guys like every page. And although I do show you guys as much as I can of these books, I do still encourage you to go out and actually buy them yourselves if you're actually interested in having one for yourself. But with this book, because it's packed with so much stuff, I'm not actually going to be able to show you guys every single thing in here. I'll skip around a little bit because there's just so much stuff in this. So number one, it's around 126, 127 pages, something like that. So it's not huge by any means, but it's just packed with a lot of stuff. Every single page has like some sort of hint or tip or some particular technique about some aspect of painting. And this is particularly framed around frame arms girls. But a lot of stuff in here can be applicable to other kinds of modeling as well. So it's not necessarily only for frame arms girls. Obviously, it sort of would lend itself well to any type of mecha musume modeling, but even just Gundam modeling or whatever kind of sci-fi mecha modeling, I think you could probably use a lot of the information in here. So let's get it started. The list price here, you can see on the back, is for 2,000 yen, which is very reasonable. So around 20 bucks, because like I said, there's a ton of information in here. It's all in Japanese, of course, so you'll have to translate that to get the exact minutiae of everything. But it does seem like a really nice value for what's in here. So here's what the actual cover looks like underneath the slipcover. It's in this very nice teal blue. I just like that. But if we open it up to the inside, this is Ogoshi Tomoe, who is the author of this book. I'm actually not really familiar with her, so I don't know really too much about her history, what she does. But obviously she's into mecha girl modeling. So here's a look at some of the builds in here, and that is how the book is going to start off after we had a brief introduction letter from Tomoe there. Over here, it's giving you the contents. Step one is the premise, and I'm like paraphrasing the Japanese translation of these, but step one is the premise of painting, so I guess just kind of like an introduction to painting, and step two is painting with an airbrush. Step three is painting with water-based paints. Step four is painting skin. Step 5 is gradation painting. Step 6 is weathering. And step 7 is making an original frame arms girl. So that'd be kind of like kit bashing, whatever, to make your own. So a lot of the parts are, of course, compatible. So here is some of the builds that are featured in here. We've got an architect kit bash with a Durga 2, which is now the Durga is coming out as an actual frame arms girl kit after they went ahead and made this. But at the time, there was no kit of that. The Baihu, the Griffin, the Basilard, the Gorai, the Laetitia, and the Gorai Kai. So this first part is just a gallery of the entries. So you got just some photographs of the models that are made in here, like kind of big main photograph and a couple of smaller detail photographs. So that's a nice way to start off. You can just kind of get an idea of what's in store. But like I said, there's a lot more in here just about like even tools and airbrush maintenance and things like that are not going to be reflected necessarily in the builds. But then obviously the techniques for those are going to be in here. Like a lot of technique guides and stuff, it's going to start off with the basic tools: nippers, knife, part separator, pliers for small little parts there, it looks like, drill, and then like a lamp, a cutting mat, things like that, normal things. Explaining a couple different types of glue, so that's good if you guys are confused about what exactly all these different types of glue do. There's a little bit of explanation there for that for you, so that's cool. CA glue or super glue down there. Color putty, sanding instruments, things like that. How to basically cut the parts. This is again all just kind of your basic tips. How to remove nubs, cut off leaving a little bit, then cut it again, clean it up with a knife, a little bit of sanding, there you go. Some other basic building techniques here when you have your pegs, cutting your pegs at a 45-degree angle to make parts easier to take apart again if you need to take them apart. And sometimes you do need to do that. There's also a little tip down here about using your knife, sticking your knife into the female end of the male-female connection of the pegs, and then twisting that to make the hole a little bigger. I would recommend I just don't really think that that's really necessary most of the time. If you do that, just be careful, because you're gonna very quickly dull your blade for one, and then you're also running a risk of just like snapping off the very, very tip of the blade. And so, I mean, it's not gonna be a big problem, and so you're just going to run through your blades a lot faster, so it's kind of a waste, I feel like, and it's not really necessary. It also shows about kind of drilling out the female connections here with the drill. Again, not really necessary for these. Usually the fit is not that tight that you would ever need to do that, but here's showing an example of what can happen. Like later when you're taking the kits apart, your peg can snap off inside there as shown. unfortunately, right there in that example. So yes, that can happen. So making the holes slightly larger might be to the benefit, but as long as you're careful, it's really not that much of a big deal, I don't feel like. This section is talking about some seam line removal on the kit. So removing some seams on some of the armor pieces, and then also filling in. So like in the front of this knee part of here, there's like a seam line in the recessed area. So rather than like filling it in, you just cut a piece of plot plate and set a piece of plot plate up inside of there to just cover that area where there's that seam line. So that's pretty clever. Some other modifications here showing how to just kind of clip and modify some parts just to make it easier for painting. Removing mold lines on parts, nubs and mold lines on parts just to get rid of that. Removing the seam lines on the flesh tone pieces, which is pretty easy because you can just remove that and sand it away, and then you don't necessarily have to paint those. You can usually get rid of the line well enough that it's going to be pretty much invisible, so you won't really have any seam line, and it's all sealed up. You don't necessarily even have to paint it. Here's a little bit about using super glue and quick hard spray to quickly set the super glue so you don't have to wait for that to cure as long, using putty and using spray, quick hard spray for the putty as well, just to cut down the time you need to actually wait for stuff to dry. About where to apply, so like this is the bazooka weapon, and there's like a nice red line going on there, which is very convenient, showing you like where you should apply the glue all around the edges, where there's going to be a seam that you're going to have to sand later. Squish it together till the glue comes out, sand it down, you're good to go. So like I said, this is just kind of basic. Once you're ready to paint, washing the pieces in some just water with a little bit of soap there, leave them out to dry. And then you got your separator box like that for separating out the colors and the parts and everything. All very convenient. All right, now we're ready to paint. Step 2, painting with an airbrush. So we got to the basics of airbrushing, or the basics of the airbrush itself. We got a guide down here showing you exactly what part is which, and different airbrushes will differ. They might not have all the exact parts. They might be a little bit different. About the compressor here as well, showing you the different parts of that. Then a little bit about just how to adjust things using the moisture trap, the pressure gauge on that. You got your spray booth over here, and some different types of paint. Here looks like a kind of brief explanation of that, a brief explanation of different paint types, using them different paint tools, thinner, other things you'll need for painting, different alligator clips. Some bits down here about putting your alligator clips into there, not overcrowding your board with too many clips, but you know, it happens sometimes. Some basics of just pouring and thinning your paint ahead of time before painting. So like it says not to mix it in the airbrush cup and not to pour directly from the bottle into your paint dish. It's all kind of common sense stuff, but it's all good to see as a reminder there. Some basics of how the airbrush works: pressing down for air, pulling back for paint, all of that good stuff. Testing it out, trying out some different lines, try spraying on a runner, just get some practice in and you're good to go. Using some like, I don't know if that's plastic card or whatever that is, just to practice spraying on, but yeah, always good to test it out first. Before you spray on any actual parts, always spray on something else first, just to make sure the paint's all coming out and everything. No matter how much you paint, I would still recommend doing that, never to spray right onto the part straight away. Now just talking about kind of generally how you would want to paint pieces, it looks like basically you're going to paint like the inside of parts, so the inner areas first, get those good and well, and then kind of make your way around the edges and some like the harder to reach areas first, and then finally do like the big wide open areas last, because those are easy to do, and then that'll keep you from overspraying on areas where you don't want to overspray. If you do those first, then you're just going to have to be building up on top of that. Making sure you've got your nubs all sanded and smooth, otherwise you're going to see those through the paint. That's what that's pointing out. And then if you need to remove paint, this is actually something I've never seen before. Spraying a little bit of thinner, or I would use actually paint remover, not thinner, but using some paint removal product and then putting the part into a little plastic bag. I would normally just put it into a small like container or jar or cup or something. But putting it into a plastic bag makes a lot of sense, because then you can just move the part around in there, and you don't need to use a lot of your liquid to actually get it to cover all the part. Because normally if you have it like in a cup, then you need to fill the cup up enough so that like the whole part is submerged, right? But if you just put it in a bag, then you can kind of save on liquid, which makes a lot of sense. Then once it's all done, once you've got the paint stripped, then you can just stick a paper towel in the bag and move that around, just soak everything up and reuse the bag. pretty convenient. So like I said, that's why I like looking at these books. Even if they cover a lot of beginner steps, I can still normally pick up like a few tips, even on like the most beginner end of the spectrum. There's always new things to learn. So a little bit about just cleaning the airbrush now. That's also very important. So make sure you're cleaning well, spraying, tips about like how to actually spray the distance from the, how you should move the airbrush and everything. Some basics of masking here, of course, masking tape, and you've got your liquid mask, which would be like a latex masking solution that you can use, all good and well. Detail painting with Tamiya enamel paint. So yes, you guys have seen me do that a million times. Then using like some mirror tape. A lot of people you will use this like mirror tape normally used for like a nail art and stuff. They'll use that because it's very cheap and easy to get, like a dollar store or something. You can get some of that, just cut off a little piece, and you can use it for like your little camera or like little reflective bits. That's very good. Pen aligning, also a very familiar concept. We all are plenty aware about pen aligning. Waterside decals. Then after that, using all your decals, using Mark Softer, Mark Setter for getting the decal to sit, lay flat on top of your part, even a curvy part like that, like the pants of the go right here. Then your top coat. So this one's using the can top coat. You got your matte finish, semi-gloss, and a gloss. So just explaining about those, how to spray them, what to do, what not to do, and then you're good to go. All right, so step 3 is painting with water-based paints. So this would be painting by hand, I think is what this is gonna go over. So here's an explanation of some different water-based paints and basic tools for using them. So you got your sponge, some water, a little brush. I don't really use water-based paint, so this is certainly not my area of expertise. But I will have to try to get into using them a little bit more, I think, probably in the future. So for this one, she's using the paints here to make a camel pattern, and this is also quite helpful. Once again, she's using like a paint card and testing it first. So she's like trying out the pattern, painting the pattern on a test card, then painting it on the part. Then the next color, trying it out on the test piece first, on the card, then on the part, and so on for the third color. I think she's using 3 colors there for the camel. That's pretty standard. And then airbrushing, water-based paint, some information about that. Again, some tips for doing that properly. Then I found this kind of interesting. If you wanted to change the skin tone color a little bit, the problem with the pre-painted faces is that if you want to change the skin tone color at all, then you have to spray over the pre-painted faces, or a lot of times they come with other faces, but the problem with using the other faces is that sometimes then when you're laying the waterside decals, it's kind of hard to know where to put the decal exactly right. So this was another interesting tip. She just painted a little bit over the pre-printed face, but you can still see the eyes a little bit through there, so then you still know exactly where the eyes are supposed to be, but the skin tone is now changed to whatever skin tone you want to make it, so that's good. Then you just take your waterside decals that you have included with every kit and then place it right over where the old one used to be that you can just barely see under the paint. So that's really cool tip. Makes a lot of sense. I don't know why I never thought of that before. So there you go. Next step is painting skin, the thing that I think is probably the most difficult aspect of all this, aside from maybe painting eyes, which is a whole other thing, which is not covered in this book, unfortunately, but that's in other books. Actually, I got 2 other different similar kind of books recently that do cover some more of that, so we'll take a look at that stuff later. But there's a bunch of different products for painting skin from different companies. Basically any company that makes lacquer-based paint, any like big lacquer-based paint company, also makes some skin tone paints. Gaia makes them, Mr. Color makes them, a bunch of companies make them. So there's a little bit just about the basics. And the problem with some of these kits sometimes is actually that the flesh tone parts usually are ABS plastic, which makes them very prone to breaking. So you have to be very careful with them. Using solvent-based paint, they can be weakened and broken very easily. So there's some tips about highlighting with the colors. So after you paint your skin tone color, then you paint your like your shadow color actually. Paint your shadow color on there, and then you paint over everything again lightly for just to kind of flatten everything back out. So here's a very convenient guide over here to show you kind of the basics of where your shadows would be. This is not actually like the best guide that I've ever seen, but it's kind of does the job well enough to show you roughly kind of where the shadows should be. If you just look up online like a skin tone painting, like shadow guide or something like that, you can see like a layout, like a different body types and kind of where the shadows should be. Here is about just adding some blush to the face using some Tamiya Weathering Master. They make 2 different types of that for skin tones, so those are convenient. And they have a Real Touch marker for the face, and there's also a accent color for skin tone as well. You can get, so like the same kind of accent color you use for panel lining, they make one in skin tone as well. You can use for filling in stuff like the little line for the mouth or whatever. There's a little bit about just using, I don't know why this is in the section about painting skin, but this is about using like metallic colors. So there's just a little bit of that there at the end, I guess, because she used some metallic pinks there for the Laetitia kit. Step 5 is gradient painting. And I know I realized that at the beginning of the book I said I'm not going to show you guys everything, and I am kind of showing you guys everything so far just because it's all very interesting. I kind of don't want to skip over any of this because it's all good. This would be the basics of highlighting and pre-shading, things like that. So it looks like basically what she's doing here is highlighting. So she's got the gun painted a darker color, then highlighting with a lighter color, then going over the whole thing with a kind of purplish color, it looks like, or blue for this particular example down there. But so whether you're doing pre-shading or highlighting, it's basically doing the same thing. You want to make the impression of a shadow kind of in the recessed areas or around the details and things like that. You can also use this for hair to make the hair look more realistic so that it looks like kind of shadows in the areas between the raised parts of the hair. So a little bit about how to do that. That's also quite useful. And again, just talking about careful spraying. So a lot of really great tips for airbrushing in here, and there's always more to learn. I've been airbrushing for a while now, and I still feel like I'm pretty amateur at it. Like I just don't really know that much. I am able to do it well enough, but not like I don't really know that much about like what I'm actually doing, I feel like. So I definitely need to study up on some of that more about kind of airbrushing technique and some more pre-shading stuff. And even though I guess the translation was gradient, but it's that entire 5th step is basically just all about pre-shading. Really should have been the title of that, or shading anyway. Not necessarily about painting gradients, but here's another little tip that you can use, like little jewelry beads and stuff like that. Again, this is stuff like for nail art, but you can use them on kits in many different ways. She used this little jewel bit for making earrings for the Laetitia, so that's pretty cool. Step 6 is weathering, and I just, after like taking a look through this book earlier just a little bit, I don't feel like weathering is necessarily her forte. So it talks about some weathering in here, but I think if you guys really want some better weathering guide, this is not necessarily that. This is kind of very basic weathering. I would recommend other guides, like especially Mike Rinaldi's Sazabi book is a much better weathering guide for Gunpla if you're looking for that. For Mecha Musume stuff, I don't know, this is probably fine, but any sort of other weathering guide is probably a little bit better. I just don't think that this is like some of the best weathering that I've ever seen by any means. Some basics of using the Mr. Weathering color, and I feel like probably when she wanted to make this book, or when she was approached for making this book, the studio or the book company or whatever told her, well, you need to include some weathering in there, and so she was just kind of like forced to do a step of weathering, when I feel like probably just based on seeing her other works in this book, maybe weathering is not something that she normally really does a whole lot of. So it's all good and fine, but yeah, this is not necessarily the best section of the book. Just some very simple kind of weathering techniques of just kind of dirtying up parts, basically. Using some real touch markers here as well to make like some chipping bits on some of the chipping and like streaking effects on some of like the mechanical parts of the designs, especially on the Griffin. The Griffin has a lot of mechanical parts in it, so it's a very good one to weather up, I suppose. But yeah, it's pretty much just like slopping the weathering products on there and wiping them off, and that's kind of an easy way to do weathering, but it's not necessarily the most sophisticated. All right, then step 7 is creating your own frame arms girl. So she made her custom one, which I think is a pretty cool concept, but the skin tone is way too light for me. It looks like a zombie or something like that with super pale skin tone. I don't know. And so, yeah, just mixing up some parts from the Durga 2. Fantastic frame arms kit, by the way, if you have never built that, or if you're just looking for a cool frame arms kit. It suffers from the same symptoms of like kind of a lot of frame arms kits, is that it is a little bit flimsy, but it makes a really cool design. I actually really like that frame arms kit. I did a review of it way back when, so check that out if you've never seen it. So she just did some seam line removal on some of the seam lines on the kit, altering the face a little bit just by giving it a bit more of a smile. The Gorai, or the Architect kit that she used for the base of this, the Frame Arms Girl Architect face doesn't really have like a smile, it has a very stoic face, so she just used a knife, carefully cut that out a little bit more to make more of a slight smile on it, and then just filled that in with some real touch marker, sanded the mold lines on the side of the face and all that, used some waterside decals for the eyes, used a couple other marking decals, and that's it. It's just a very abrupt ending here. if you want like to see the finished product, you have to go back to the beginning. At the front part as the gallery of the finished product, what that actually looks like. It's kind of awkward that like it goes from like decals and then the book is done. So it's kind of a weird ending, but anyway, there you go. There is the kind of closing letter here from Tomoe-san. Another nice photo there of her, the staff, and that is it for the book. So yeah, like I said, this is a really nice book. It's interesting size as well too. It's not the same size as like your normal magazine. It's a little bit smaller, so it's kind of like a medium size. And a pretty good thickness, like I said, it's around 126 pages. And as you could see there, it's like every page has some stuff on it. You don't have a lot of like filler pages where it's just like a bunch of photographs and not really much information, which is fine because you want to see just some nice photographs in these as well. But this one does have just a ton of information in there. So definitely recommend it for you guys if you're interested in painting Mekamusume kits, 30 minutes missions kits, Megami device, anything like that. Or just you're interested in just kind of learning a little bit more about some different airbrushing techniques and things like that. I think there's a lot of good information in here. So definitely check it out if you guys are interested. And every time I review books like this, people want to know if we have them or why we don't have them at USA Gundam Store. And I just know that getting books like this is something I would love if we could get them easier at USA Gundam Store. Just getting these from Japan is just logistically not really very feasible, unfortunately. So if you guys are looking for this book, if you just search around online, unfortunately we don't have them at USA Gundam Store, but you should be able to find it. Just search for like Frame Arms Girl Painting Manual or Frame Arms Girl Painting Textbook, something along those lines for the translation of that there. But you should be able to find it. I definitely recommend it for you guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you think about that? You think it's worth a $20 asking price for that? I think so. But of course, if you're looking for some frame arms kits and paints and a lot of hobby supplies and everything else that we saw actually in the contents of there, you can find all that stuff at USA Gundam Store. Just check the link and the coupon code down in the video description below. And of course, they make me making these videos possible. So just thanks to them for making it all possible. Thank you guys for hanging out, liking the video, commenting, subscribing. I really appreciate all your guys' support. Until next time, hope you're all having a great day. Bye guys.